All right, we are recording here with Brent Frederick, who is a new faculty and at Ohio University, an assistant professor of instruction. You said you kind of have a co-appointment, right? I mean, you're in music theater,
That's right.
and then but you're
So I
also doing
live in the
some
School
stuff
of
in school music. So,
Theater.
like, let us know what's going
Yeah.
on here for you at OU.
Yeah, I'm new, and our music theater program is new at OU by 2 years. So our incoming students this year are the second class that we're bringing in, and I am the music director for that program. So after the days of COVID, when we can put people in a pit and have an orchestra and do a giant musical, I'm going to be the person down there waving the baton or playing piano and doing what I've always done there. So my job is unique because I kind of straddle those worlds. I sit in the theater school, but I also teach music classes. So I teach instrumentation and I teach theory for our incoming music theater majors and some of our non-majors. And yeah, just try to get my head around OU and Athens from this point of view. This is mostly what I see of it.
Yeah, it's pretty wild because we first started talking because, like, you being coming from New York was kind of the epicenter for a minute, right?
It really was. And we escaped right as it was going down. What you were seeing on the news of East Elmhurst and the hospital and the refrigerated trucks, that was my neighborhood. That was about a mile from my house. So I have an almost 2-year-old now with my wife, and we're both in musical theater, and she's a singer and actor. And yeah, we got out of Dodge. We relocated to North Carolina. We were really lucky that we had some family friends down there, and we rode out the worst of the New York City COVID wave. And I had accepted this job, so I knew this was happening. And, you know, we were closer to Athens than we were in New York City. So we came up in the middle of the pandemic and bought a house. And
Right.
here we are.
Yeah, and actually not too far from where we're at. So maybe we'll be able to ride bikes to each other's houses
Absolutely.
when it's safe to do, and when your 2-year-old can ride a bike.
Yeah, we're ready to get him on a bike. We have one of the 2 flat yards in Athens for him. So
Totally. Well,
yeah,
you guys live in a good area too. Well,
yeah.
so you so for like right now we're recording this because we're doing some interviews to build I don't know, a repository of stuff for students taking a music technology class. And I just did one with a local music educator last week, and we just thought, it'd be great for the students to hear what you're doing, and in terms of both technology, but also just to share, like, from the OU perspective about, what faculty are, who they are, what they do, and that sort of thing. Because we're co-teach, I guess, I mean, it's hard to say we're co-teaching this class, right?
Yeah,
We're just kind of hanging on by a thread every week. Um,
I'm helping out. You're doing a lot of heavy lifting, and I'm doing some spoon feeding.
yeah, but I'm to all the blame for all the organizational messes and the wrong information. But no, it's great because we've been chatting about this a little bit this summer, and I mean, you come from I mean, your background being in working in music theater and as a pianist, and it was, I'd love to know, like, when you're doing that, what's your preferred setup? Like, what do you bring in with you? What do you do, and what skills do you have to, tap into?
I live in this weird niche world in musical theater where the gear is often provided. At least it is at the top levels of the industry. But what made me marketable was that I knew the technology and I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty and work with it. In New York, there was sort of 2 classes of piano players, at least. So piano players who just wanted to show up and sit down and start playing and go home. And then the other people who were interested in the technology and how everything worked. And I found that it was a really fine line to walk as a performer in a professional situation, because you're meeting people all the time and they want to put you in a box right away. So, if they're going to think of you as a computer person, it's hard to break that barrier with them and say, no, really, I'm a keyboardist, I'm a conductor, I do all this other stuff. So I found that the tech in that world helped me get by when I needed money and gigs and things between big theater work, but I almost was completely reliant on technology through every other gig I was doing. And to the point that my break in the Broadway scene was because I knew Finale. It was just because I knew computers and I was always interested in this stuff. I go back to Finale version, gosh, 3, something like that. So I've been using it since the mid 90s. And I always tell people who I'm mentoring that you just never know who you're talking to and how to make good first impressions, and how important that is, really, because the technology for me, I had lost a gig. I was down in the dumps. I had a whole summer ahead of me and nothing going on, where I thought I had it all figured out. And I got a call from somebody I didn't know who needed help putting sheet music together. I said, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm fast with Finale. And I found myself working with him in his house and meeting his family and working the crazy hours of 3 a.m., getting arrangements charted out. And fast forward a year, he was a conductor of a Broadway musical. I didn't know that at all about him when I met him. And he got me in as a substitute on that production, which was the first one I ever did in New York. And then I turned that into a national tour that I conducted for a year. And, it snowballed from there. So I don't mean to say that to minimize playing, because playing was super important and you have to kind of be known on the scene and in an industry where it's just all reputation based. But yeah, having the technology was super important. And Broadway and touring Broadway and cruise ships, anything like that, as a keyboard player, you're just living in it all the time. So a lot of the parts we're playing, if you're not playing a first piano book, which would be a conductor chair if it's a playing conductor, or the main piano book if it's a stick conductor with several others. Those secondary and third keyboard books are all the other stuff that producers have saved money on and cut down and put into piano books. So you're playing some crazy stuff, just non-pianistic at all, 16th note patterns in the left hand, which are maracas, while you're doing, 16th note runs of string parts, or you're doing 2 lead lines essentially in both hands, which make no sense because one is like a string stab and the other is a syncopated offbeat bass trombone thing, because there's no live bass trombone player. So yeah, it's all heavily done in main stage, and it uses a lot of virtual instruments. On Broadway, at least, the union is really strong, so everything is done live. There are some situations where they'll go with a click track and we're all playing to a metronome, and there might be some kind of sweetener on there, but that's really the exception and not the rule in New York, at least. So I was marketable because I knew how to do that, and I worked more frequently because I could take gigs as a keyboard programmer, which I did all the time. I worked on Newsies and Aladdin and a lot of these shows that you've heard of, and I just sort of snuck in the back and was quiet. And when something went wrong, I would go up and help the players and get the technology sussed out, and I would be on call. So I'd be sitting at home in the middle of the afternoon and get a panic text from somebody saying, oh yeah, key 1 is acting crazy at Aladdin today. So can you be there by intermission? And I'd be down there at intermission with the entire audio team, and we'd be pulling cables and making sure everything is correct and assigned right, or swapping equipment in and out. So it's all technology on that front. And now I just talked for a really long time, so you're like,
no,
whoa.
it's great. It's great. And actually, I'm really glad, because I just want to talk to you about
my
this.
earpods just
had it
died.
not been
Hold
COVID,
on.
we would
So
have
I'm
gone out.
really great at doing a great technology blurb here. Let me turn my speakers on because I don't hear anything at all.
Oh yeah, hit.
Okay.
Abandoning ship.
Abandoning ship. They're great technology until they don't work.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're talking about all that stuff, because it would have been a thing that I think, when you've been in town, we would have gone out and had some drinks and got to know each other, and that sort of thing. So this is I guess, an available substitute for doing that stuff. And we're both keyboard players, right? I mean, but you do stuff that's very different than me, and something that struck me that you were talking about is you kind of had this broad set of skills that made you marketable, and your niche, or your career just sometimes gets carved out of happenstance.
Absolutely.
Just like you've developed relationships, you showed up, you did your job, you were a good human being, you did it super well, and then they're like, everybody's like, I got a person, when I need, like, I got a lawn guy and I got a roofer, it's like that sort of thing. But this is my music, this is my go-to music person, and I know they're going to deliver. And being broad, like having a lot of skills is really important. I mean, you don't want to be a jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing, but flexible, and because you want to work. You'd still rather want to work in the industry than not.
Yeah, and I was lucky in, I don't know, how long was I, 2007 to almost to 2020. I never had a side gig. And
Mm.
I was really lucky that way because of this kind of stuff. I was a musical Swiss Army knife. I still am. I say was because I feel like the whole industry has evaporated. But part of what was really exciting about coming to OU was the dedication to this kind of work and this technology, and allowing me to stay active in those communities and keep doing readings and workshops when they come up. I had a big touring life before this all happened, where we would go out on the road and play. I have a doo-wop group called the Doo-wop Project. So it's all guys who did Jersey Boys and Motown, and we have variants of that show where there's a 5-piece band on stage just doing a combo, and then we also do a full orchestra show. So we'll go around and do Detroit Symphony and do Pittsburgh and do all these places. So it's interesting because it lets me scratch all those itches. That's like getting up and playing free-form music and having a blast. Broadway is definitely an interesting niche too, because it's about having the chops, but it's about replicating the same thing every night. And if you are substituting for somebody, which everyone is when you're starting out, I can talk about how that works, but the best compliment you can get is, oh, I didn't know somebody new was in tonight. If you come in and try to hotshot on something or show somebody up, you're not going to be invited back. And it's so different than playing club dates or playing shows like what I would do when I was out on the road with the band and that kind of work.
And the level of consistency and accuracy that's required in those situations, night in and night out. I mean, how many shows you do in a row in a month, and be able to be sharp enough to not get complacent, and that's a skill in and of itself too.
Yeah, it is, and it's why the union is so flexible with us to allow people to take time off. You can miss 50% of the dates in a given calendar quarter and keep your job if that's your chair on a Broadway show. So, and my actor friends think that's crazy because they can't call out at 50% of their shows and put an understudy on. But it's a consequence too of just having some of the best and the best doing those gigs. It wasn't always that way. When recording studio work and jingle writing and all that kind of stuff was big years ago, when New York had a recording scene, that was the really lucrative work, and Broadway was kind of something that you did to get by if you had to. And now they're jobs that people keep for their entire lives and just sub out when they can. And it's the way to get into that system. But yeah, you have to be 100% accurate every time you do it, and you have to be a people person because you're going to have different conductors and different personalities involved down there. I mean, I got some crazy stories I can't say on tape about Cyndi Lauper coming backstage at Kinky Boots and going around the line, you're new, oh, what do? You played the keyboards. And, it was this surreal experience to go through getting feedback from your idols in a situation as controlled as Broadway, where so much of your performance is, oh, your volume pedal was at 8 instead of 4 in this passage. So all of a sudden it stuck out because there was a substitute board operator out at the front of house that night. So, everybody is working together, and it's really cool. It's just this magic alchemy that happens to make it come together.
Yeah.
But technology is all part of that. And the more you want to work, at least from my standpoint, the more you should know this stuff.
It was interesting that you talked a little bit about Finale in the mid 90s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because that's my parents bought me my first version of Finale, and I want to say it was like 95. I don't remember what it was, but I always tell people it was three floppy disks, like,
yeah,
right? And it was, I wasn't doing a whole lot with it. It was really expensive too for my parents to buy that for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I was just, my family was not wealthy. And so, but as an undergraduate, one thing I did is my work study job was for the music school director, and I was copying all of his basically all of his scores. I was digitizing. He was one of those composers that was, very meticulous about every single detail and that he wrote. And like I would change an enharmonic spelling just because it'd make it easier. It's like, no, you can't do that because it changes the whole theoretical. But his manuscript, his actual, the way he was so beautiful. I don't even know why he wanted to digitize it, because he was coming from that. But it was for me to learn on these incredibly complex scores. It really kind of put me through the ringer on Finale, and it's hard for me to. I worked through Sibelius a little bit, and at that point in my life, is like, this is not going to net me what it needs to. But it's fascinating to see how the program has gotten more powerful, but also having silly little problems that didn't exist, right? Almost.
And it looks about the same
ago.
as it did in 95.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like Sibelius. I went through a phase of Sibelius where I courted it a little bit. And I keep it around because I have a lot of arrangements I wrote for cruise ships back then. And I still sell them. People get in touch and, hey, I'm doing a headliner show and I need such and such a chart. And I'm like, here's my library, but they're all in Sibelius. And I've never gotten around to getting them out of that because of how differently they handle rhythm charts. And I don't know. I write faster in Sibelius I find it thinks more from a composer standpoint, but I'm meticulous, like you're saying too, where, I think we've had some of the same kind of mentors, and you can do every little thing you need to in Finale. And when I sit down and I try to do that in Sibelius, I end up tearing my hair out.
Yeah, but the rhythm scores are really a big deal because, when I'm a jazz musician, so most of what, I do other stuff, but like, when half of what I'm doing are charting out drum parts and stuff, and it's still not where I want it to be, and therefore those parts of my charts are my weakest, and limited by the amount of time I have to put into the software to get the result that I want.
We should swap some templates. I have some really dorky things to help with hits over time.
I love it. Yeah, and then the chord symbols change and the fonts change, and every time that happens, I feel like I have to spend forever dealing with it, and at some point, it just didn't matter anymore. You're going to get the part you're going to get from me.
Yeah. I've been lucky a few times on big orchestra gigs where I'm thinking along these lines because I think as a copyist, because I've always been a copyist as I'm doing my work. And anyone who took my instrumentation class has already heard me harp on this, but it's such a luxury when you just have to write it and hand it to somebody, isn't it?
Yeah.
Here, you take my mess. I've had projects come to me as Logic projects where they have to end up in Finale, and I have taken MIDI dumps out of Logic into Sibelius first, because I find that anything staccato that's going to show up as a 16th note, I can change to a quarter with an articulation with 2 keystrokes in Sibelius, and it would take me forever in Finale. So I had workflows where I've gone from one program into another program to accomplish what I want, and it's just, I don't know, you do what gets the job done.
That's right. As quickly as possible so you can get on to your next project too.
Yeah, and saying yes to gigs, that's how I did all of this stuff.
Right.
It's, just being presumptuous a little bit, trusting your skills and knowing that you're the person they asked for a reason. So, I do this whole orchestral mock-up. Can you do that? I go, sure. It pays $1,500. Great. And I spent it immediately on virtual instrument libraries. And that's the first time I ever worked with that. So, you just start picking stuff up along the way, but it's given me something in every dry season, and for that I'm just super grateful.
How often did you either say no to a project, like when you're kind of coming up, right? Did you say no just because it didn't interest you, or did you say no because you couldn't do it, or did you say yes because even though you didn't technically know how, but you knew you knew how to figure it out? Like, what was that like coming up for you?
I said yes all the time when I was younger. And I found that if I said yes to everything, that the quality of what I was doing was staying about the same. I was getting into gigs with the same frustrations with composers who hadn't fleshed out any of their charts. And in my world, they want a music director to come in and, oh, you're going to write the score for me. Here's a tape. And I'm like, wait a second. And, when you're young and green, you just say, okay, and you go about doing it. And after a while, you start to work with different caliber of people. And it's like, oh, that's not part of it. There are other people who could do this. So you can concentrate on one part of your job, which I always found to be a hard thing in my life. I'm a Renaissance musician. I like to do a lot of different things. I played piano, trumpet, was a vocal major, drum major, conductor, marching band, orchestra, show choirs, symphonic choir. Like I did all of that stuff. And I eventually had to pare it back a little bit. And I found when I started saying no to some of this work that my career took off a little bit more. At least for me in New York, it's like they say, you move to New York to work somewhere else, or you move to Nashville to hit the road and tour. Or LA, same story. And I was doing that. I was just saying yes to so much stuff, and it was taking me out of town. And the better people I was working with who were getting projects that were at inception that would have been great projects would call me, and I had to say no because I was installing a cruise ship show on the deck of I was in Alaska for 2 more weeks, and I was doing it because it paid bills. And I finally just had to have a little bit of a, come to Jesus moment and be, I'm going to stay in town. I'm not going to do some of these projects where I just, you start to have a smell test for them. And, if I'm walking in, I want to see what the materials you have are before I commit to doing this. And I found that it was important to have the experience from when I said yes to a lot of stuff, but I didn't really take the next leap until I was able to shed some of that and be more selective and create time and space for new projects.
Sure. Yeah, I had some of that same stuff too. I mean, it was hard for me to say no. People would call me for a gig and I would do it. I mean, I wasn't living in New York City, so it was a little bit different. There wasn't a density of work. I mean, I had to take it because it was there. And but there was a time where I had this opportunity to, I kind of pitched a little bit of a kind of a music director type of position for people that I really, really liked and respected. And I thought they were, wonderful human beings, and band was fun and all this stuff. And, I did an interim moment with them, and I was like, well, if you want me to serve in this capacity, this is what I need to make it happen. I was like, you want a 7-horn, if you want a big band chart, it costs $300 to do, and if you want me to write it intentionally so you can pare it down to, it'd be like $50 to pare it down to a septet. If you want an orchestral chart, I'll charge you $5. But it's because it was all working with this information, and I just priced myself out. And it was like, but that's how much time it was going to take me to do this well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had everything else going on, and because of that, I lost the gig. But it was okay because it was going to take me, just an extraordinary amount of time. Even when it's like, well, you're a music director, what's your scale? I'm like, well, compared to other people, it's X, and then I still got to contract these people in cities and towns, and but it was my way of saying yes if it works for like my my financial stuff, and therefore I kind of said no. But that was like, if I had been 10 years younger, I would have been like, I'll do it for much less, because I was hungry for it, and I didn't have other opportunities too. And that's the other big thing as well. Like, didn't have a family, didn't have a full-time job. I was tired of driving 50,000 miles a year to do gigs for $75. But you say yes for a long time until you can actually start saying no.
Absolutely. And people, the more they know of your skill set, I find the more they want to take advantage of you, and the more you have to stand up for yourself. So like, it's hard to do that sometimes on some of my newer projects. I use an entertainment lawyer. I finally had to divorce myself from it. I've had a big show that I helped get off the ground, and it turned into this because I was doing all of the production side, the clicks. It was Irish dance, recording all of the taps, needing people to do that, writing the charts, writing vocal arrangements, doing all of this work, rehearsing the band, contracting the band, all this stuff you said. And the more you do, the less they want to pay you, because you can't go back and say, no, really, if I wasn't doing this, you would be paying these 6 people to do this work. And I find it so adversarial. Like, I don't want to be involved in those kind of discussions. So I've I've been lucky. Agents aren't common in our line of work, but with new projects, there are a few in New York, and I've been really lucky to be able to work with them because they know what to ask for and can just turn around and say, great. And if you're going to do a cast recording, he's going to get this percentage of it, and I don't have to fight with them about that. I can walk in the door and have it finished. But yeah, people are always going to resent you for standing up for your art when they are the bean counter end of things.
Right.
So.
Right. So part of the premise of this is talking a little bit about some tech. So you said working with Mainstage
All the time.
So what's your process? What's going on? How do you have it set up? What do you do?
Yeah. Say it's a new musical, and we're going to work with the producers to figure out what a budget is, what they want to have. And there are some common controllers. I'm still partial to the now discontinued Yamaha the S90 XSs, which were all over Broadway pits for a long time. Now you're seeing CP300s. So you're going to spec out some gear. I like a really nice solid controller with nice solid action to it. This is my CP4 stage over here, which actually is a little heavy for some of my taste. But yeah, if it's a pianistic show, I'll have something like this. If it's a show that has a lot of B3 or fast string parts, you might add a second tier and do some kind of Nord, on top or something like a Roland Phantom were popular for a long time, the 66 key versions. So yeah, it's specking out the gear. I want a nice hardware controller, figuring out what kind of budget range you're working with to come up with an interface. So, and part of the gig is knowing how to make it work for people at various budget points. So not everybody is going to be buying fire faces and putting them in a rack and all of that. But in our line of work, it's tricked out Mac Minis all the time because they rack mount really easy. You can put an SSD in them, max out the RAM, and they fly. They're great. So I host Ivory on them for all of my shows that I've designed, and with an SSD and a lot of RAM, you're just layers and layers of polyphony.
So we have students that are like OU students that are watching. So Ivory is
a virtual piano instrument. So it is a sampled piano, and they went down every key and up to probably 12 velocity settings, which is just volume levels, so that every time you play a different volume or a repeated note, you should be hearing a different sample coming back. So it's super, super lush and beautiful sounding, and it features sympathetic resonance. If you keep the pedal down, it's going to know algorithmically how the soundboard would change and react to that. And you can do all kinds of crazy stuff like flip it from the audience to the player's perspective, so it'll put the low strings from the left to the right depending on how you want it. So there are others too that people use a lot. Piano Tech is another one that people are using a lot in my scene, where they're not using samples. It's all algorithmic. So it's really, really a heavy CPU lift to do that. So
for sure. That's what I use because I don't have to store all those samples. Like when you're having an instrument like in Ivory or whatever, it's a lot of space. Like if you can dedicate a machine specifically to that, great. But like my laptops, I've been using Piano Tech for a good number of years, and I really like it, and I use it for recording too. It's when you learn how to get the sound exactly how you want it, it's. I mean, I'm a pianist, and it's tough. I mean, there's enough digital markers in there to pick up on something's not quite right. But if you got nuance and you wanted to go and fix a few things, and the price is really good too.
Yeah, I like it. I've been impressed with it. It's this. I think it's like Finale or Sibelius. You kind of use what you learn a lot of times.
Yeah, I also use what I could afford.
I really like Ivory. In my world too, for a big budget show, everything is redundant. So it's not just one Mac Mini; it's a rack with two Mac Minis and two. Right, because
you can't have one go. You can't have it go down and be like, "Sorry, we got to pause."
Yeah. So all of our shows, there's a button right there to switch to the backup interface, and then a separate one, which is a KVM switch, which will change over the mouse and the keyboard that's connected and the computer screen. So all of a sudden, you're seamlessly, hopefully, looking at your backup machine. There's some new audio interfaces that are great too. The iConnect, or what are those things? I don't know. I haven't even gotten my hands on them yet, but one interface that can work across two computers, because it gets really expensive to spec one of these systems out, because you need an
Yeah.
audio splitter router too. So one of those radial device switching systems, which are, well into the like $1,200 to $1,500 range.
Right.
But they're starting to incorporate interfaces to those now too. So it's getting easier and easier to do redundancy. But yeah, some systems for me, this tour I was talking about was really 4 computers working in tandem. So it was
Mm-hmm.
2, a main and a backup for all the keys and synth sounds, and then 2 for the playback. So a lot of times it's Ableton in our business. In
Yep.
this particular show, I did QLab, and basically had it set up that the MD, the keyboardist, ran that whole show from on stage. So depending what patch he was in main stage, I had it configured that the top note, when he hit it on the keyboard, would send a mapped MIDI note across to the other set of computers, which would launch the tracks, which were muxed together in multi-channel wave files, and up to 10 channels we were running on that show. So time code that was going to the lighting and controlling all the video, and it's
Because
a
that's
lot of
another thing that
trial.
people don't think about too, is
Yeah.
just how do you incorporate the entire AV experience, and that's like something that impresses me a lot. I mean, because it all has to sync.
It has to, and when it doesn't, it's terrifying. And you get a show report when the tour is somewhere across the country saying, "Oh, that something went down," and you're thinking, "Oh God, I hope it wasn't my my component here."
Right.
But yeah, it's so much technology, and just getting all those computers to play nice with MIDI splitters and routers, and sending MIDI over XLR snakes to the front of the house to trigger sound effects. Even in music theater, we're doing that all the time.
Yeah.
Some sound effects are coming from the mixer, but sometimes they're mapped musically into the keyboard, which is some of the really fun stuff to play when you've got gunshots or typewriter sounds there in the keyboard, or Into the Woods and the giant steps on somebody and you get like a great splat sound effect and get to hear the whole
It's kind of
audience.
satisfying to hit one key and then something grotesque happens.
It is, yeah. Kinky Boots had all the boxing bells in there. There was a big boxing match on stage. You'd be playing up here on the B3, and then boom, bottom key on the keyboard, ding, and everybody going through that missed one at some time or another, and you would just see the actors go.
Well, and one of the things I think that is challenging for people that are kind of like coming up wanting to do this is access to this tech, because it's not, you mentioned it, it's not cheap.
Yeah.
Like, you can get a MIDI keyboard and you can run main stage on your computer, or you can get, some sort of modeling software. You could just use GarageBand that has sounds in there that will get you through, a certain level of expectations. But then when you make that next jump to things that take a huge load on your CPU, or that are integrating with lights, that are integrating with, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you can spend so much money
Oh yeah.
on that stuff. And if I'm 22 years old, do I have $20,000 to drop into this stuff on tech that is going to be obsolete in 5 years?
Yeah.
Or updated, I don't know.
Mainstage uses that same GarageBand and Logic library.
Yeah.
So it's like 30 some gigs of stuff. And, for my money on anything except brass attacks, it gets you really in the ballpark. If you know how to create different instruments in there, blending some of the sounds, you can do some really, really realistic string patches and, just stuff that sounds like it cost a lot more than it did, but it's diving in and doing a little bit of the sound design end of things.
And it doesn't crush your computer, your CPU either. Mainstage is very minimal load, all things considered.
It's an amazing program for $30 or something that controls all of this stuff. It comes with a sound library. When we were coming up, and that involved, racks of outboard sampling and sequencing, and it's crazy. It's got a auto sampler built into it now. So if you have an instrument you want to play, you can just sample that right into the onboard sampler and you're good to go.
Yeah.
It's so powerful and just fun to play around with. You know, it's nice to know where the sky is the limit on some shows, but you can do great work. And honestly, in the pop world, it's not what I described at all. Some of my audio engineer friends who do big touring acts have invited me back at some big rock country shows, and there are playback engineers backstage, and you know, you see the rigs that the players have up there, and a lot of times it's the players' stuff, and they're coming in like we do to a gig, and it's their sounds. The artist doesn't have a whole lot of oversight over that, and that boggles my mind. But it's
well, sometimes they don't even know. They're just like, these are the people that I want around me, and you're a keyboardist, and you've got 4 or 5 instruments, and you got a setup that works for you, and that's the stuff that they're used to, and let's move with it. And then your whole crew that makes sure that that's working, and you know, that makes a huge difference too.
Did you ever watch Dave Rosenthal's walkthrough on Billy Joel's rigs?
No, I need to though.
Oh, you gotta. He did a thing with Keyboard Magazine probably 5-6 years ago now, and they moved over to using MainStage, and Billy is playing a virtual piano and a grand piano shell now too, because from what I understand, he's still playing his songs in the original keys, and they're just transposing.
Right, because his voice has changed, right?
But Dave has this incredible rig he built where there's so much redundancy. He's got all of the tunes mapped out in MainStage, but he's still got the hard with the Kurzweil hardware up there with the original patches and sounds that if anything goes sideways, he can flip a switch and touch any keyboard in that rig and have what he needs with it. It's a gearhead's dream. It's a great interview. If you find that, it's got to be on the website. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like something that's the instructor of record for a music technology class at a university to share with students in that class.
Here's some required viewing for all y'all.
I could just well, the thing is, a lot of the students that are taking this class that working on together, they're freshmen. It's technically right now music technology for music educators, and then we're going to broaden it and we're going to make it music technology for musicians, because everybody needs a grasp of technology. But gosh, you can get in the weeds really fast and lose sight of the musicianship, right? But there are also designers and technicians that are not necessarily musicians, but they know how to kind of bridge that gap, and those are really special people.
Absolutely. It's why I talk a lot in my theory classes from my non-majors and our actors just about relating audio and relating acoustics to music theory. So when you're on a gig someday and the monitors are feeding back at you and you're working with somebody at front of house, and you can say, you know what, it's somewhere around 510 is ringing out, or every time the pianist is playing the A below middle C, if you know that that's 220 and that's ringing out, you're working to better yourself as a musician. And there's such a provincial attitude sometimes among people in our business, and I think that only works against all of us. The more we can understand, not necessarily be an expert in, but just understand and appreciate how we all make our art, it goes to being a well-rounded artist. And
then respecting the people that do things that we have a cursory knowledge of, right? I mean, I can set up a sound system. I could manage a certain level of live shows, but then there's this gigantic leap that when I watch those people that are really great at live music production, it's just, it blows your mind, because it is so deep, and it's the difference between people nodding their heads and standing up and dancing on their chairs, because they make that music come alive in a way that sells to an audience. And sometimes, like, as musicians, we get these blinders. We forget that from us to the audience can be a direct line. I play piano in my house and people come out and hang out. That's fine. There's nothing in between that. But if I'm playing in a hall, I've got me and then I've got my audience, but there's this whole middle thing that makes or breaks it. And we sometimes, like, I've toured with some people that are real jerks.
Oh, yeah.
To sound people. And sometimes, I don't want to say it's deserved, but the sound people don't know what they're doing. But sometimes these cats really know what they're doing, and they're just getting belittled by somebody that thinks they know more than them. And it's like, how do we balance that stuff out and create together as a community? And it's been tough for me. And sometimes I'm just like, this is as good as it's gonna get, and yelling at these guys, it's not gonna make it any better.
Yeah. And you learn that through experience. I
Yeah.
think what you said is so right. You just have to walk into every gig and give everybody that level of respect, to assume that they're competent and that everyone is working to the same goal of putting on a good show. And like you said, there will be people who are incompetent or just untrained on the equipment at hand, but the more you can help people like that, the more successful you will be as well. Just everything is so collaborative, and in musical theater, it's my line of work. I've talked about this show I wrote, this Irish rock show. So I music supervised, orchestrated, did all these tracks. My job, when we were in rehearsals, I ran Ethernet out to the house, and I sat at front of house with the audio person who was a friend of mine, and he set up all these big tours, Sarah Bareilles and One Republic, and Thomas Rhett is his big one now. And he's nicest, chillest guy. You'd never guess his resume from anything. And if something popped out in the mix, we'd both be listening, and you could just kind of like develop a language to look at each other. And, we'd have like is that you or is that me? And he'd be like, I think that's you. Like, okay, so I'm going to jump in here because I can see the computer on my laptop screen on stage and be like, oh yeah, my glockenspiel patch is screaming or something. And, just totally jump in, lower it down. How many dB do you want that down? Okay, I was going for like left of center. You want me to bring it back? Yeah. And you find this collaborative, collegial relationship, and it's so important because everybody is interdependent on everybody else to look and sound good. And you have to leave your ego at the door. And the best people I've ever worked with do that. You'd never assume they had the resume they do. And the people who are making the biggest fuss are trying the hardest and sinking the fastest.
Right. And because they're looking for somebody else to blame.
Yeah.
If you don't like the way that you sound, it could be your mix on stage. It could be what's going on in the house, or maybe you just don't sound that great.
Yeah.
When you get to a certain level, you work with people that sound great, and you can be like, this is not them. This is me. I'm in this new space, and this isn't quite how it needs to be. But there's this kind of like when you're kind of cutting your teeth. I would say that word, but cutting teeth. But like as you're growing up as a musician, you're kind of cross fading with all these different people, and you got to make it work because you still want to continue, but you also have to realize you're limited by that product that they're putting out there. But you want to be a kind human being.
As a pianist, like we have no control on a gig. You walk in and you hope that's a nice piano.
And you hope that the people that you're working with actually know their keys. So like, hey, I want to sing X song. Okay, what key? I don't know. Just something in the middle. Well, what's the middle? And I make a guess, and you do an intro, and then they come in a completely different key. They know, they have this great like retention of a pitch center, and they're going to sing on that all day long, but they just never cared to learn that, oh, I'm singing this song in G. And then I'm like, great, I can work with that. But instead you have to like fish around for that all the time. Like people just don't know where they fit in the ecosystem of a community of music making. And that's hard because there's ego gets in the way too. Like we think we're great at everything.
Right.
And we're not. And so when you surround yourself with people like you're talking about, like your buddy that you can look at each other and you take responsibility for your role in there, and you have this mutual respect for each other, that's actually kind of more rare than not until you get to a certain level, I think.
Yeah, it's a luxury. Like that's why the business is so hard to break into, because you find people like that, and the next gig comes along, and if I ever need to pitch a sound person to anything, I'm like, please, like, and that's the way my career was. That's the way New York is. It's you're not a regular in one of those orchestras until somebody dies or retires, because it's a very small community of contractors who are doing that. Or in every touring city where we would go on the road, and I would see, sometimes to the musical detriment, the people who were getting called for gigs.
Oh yeah.
like, oh I really need to fire this trombone player. And I call my contractor and she says, no, you can't do that. Oh, he's the local contractor.
Yeah, that's right. He's the union president and
Yeah.
the contractor.
And the contractor. So I just walk back to my friend at front of house and I'm like, hey, the next 2 weeks, trombone is just off in the house.
Yeah, totally straight up.
But yeah, it's, you never know what you're going to get. At least in musical theater, we're carrying our own rigs and it's some level of predictability. But there's something to be said for walking into a gig and all right, sometimes you're going to get some crazy, Steinway D that's worth more than most houses, and it's beautiful. And I had a gig once I walked into, and the sound check was weird. They had this ugly piano, but it sounded great, like a little baby grand Baldwin. And the sound people that said, do you want to play this? Or we've got this keyboard over here, and they had, some kind of S90 sitting over there in an amp. And I'm like, no, I'll play the piano. I've given a choice. I'll play the piano on a gig with a doo-wop band. So I sound checked the piano. It's all good. And this was a big charity fundraiser. So chilling in the dressing rooms, and somebody comes down. We were on in the second half of the show, and they're like, have you been watching the feed from on stage? No, what do you mean? You might want to go up there. And I go up, and it's here. They had hired a Jerry Lewis tribute act in the first half, and he got onto the piano, danced on it, basically destroyed it. The lid was gone, the keys were broken, the bench was kicked, and here, what hadn't come to me, they had gotten this keyboard as a backup, knowing he was going to destroy the piano.
Oh, man.
Somebody donated a beater piano to this gig so this guy could destroy it. I didn't know that until afterward. And he kind of walked past us at intermission and says, good luck. I wanted to have some choice words with him, but yeah, you just never know. So
that's something beautiful about bringing your own stuff in, because you know how to troubleshoot it, you know how to make it work. I love playing on a really great piano, but sometimes I walk into what's supposed to be a really great piano and it's trash. Whenever I go out and play, especially like, if I'm playing in a situation that I know I don't have a piano tuner between rehearsals or whatever, I've got a small piano tuning kit I take with me, just hammer and stoppers, and I'll go and bang out unisons, and I don't tell anybody about it, but like, that's a huge difference to me. The sound that I'm hearing is not, if it's not inspiring, I play bad, or I just don't play at my potential. Yeah. But when I play with the keyboard with my computer, it always sounds consistent. At least, I know that it's going to work.
That's next level. I got to write that down and get a little kit and learn how to do that.
I mean,
so someday when gigs come back,
I'm not voicing anything. I know how to make a unit. When you play one note, and it's like,
yeah,
I can fix that on the fly. But sometimes, like, there's really, really great piano technicians on the gig, and I can be like, I just, like, last summer? I can't even remember. Time is lost. Last summer I did like a week with Pittsburgh Symphony, and it was a ton of fun. But I could leave a note for the piano technician or whatever, and I'd say, certain, like, B5 is out of tune. And then they'll go in there like, oh yeah, it's totally gone, and they can fix it like really quickly, like in an intermission, because I can have that language to tell them. Yeah. But if I have my keyboard running through a computer, it's going to always be in tune.
Yeah.
But I still don't like it as much as I like playing on a real great instrument,
Yeah, especially for a gig like that.
Oh, well, yeah.
I always feel like I'm disrespecting symphony pianos when I have the privilege of playing them.
Well, I've also been asked to play like with a symphony that had a Steinway.
Turn around and just I'm banging the hell out of the thing and just watching this violin section around me adjust their earpieces to tune it all out.
Well, there was like a symphony I was playing with, and it was a pop show, and they had a really fine singer that was joining in, and it was like a Christmas pop show. And I was talking with the director, and they brought me in because they needed somebody to record changes. And so that's great. This is what I do. And he said, well, bring your own keyboard. And I said, okay. He says, you have a keyboard with your own speakers. I'm like, yeah. Because they wanted me to be sitting up in front by the conductor and the singer with a digital piano and a set of speakers when they had a Steinway sitting in the back that they just were not able to or unwilling to readjust the stage to put it in the front by the singer and put the orchestra in a different space around it. And to me, it was just, it's like, you're never going to get this sound as good. And then it was a lost cause,
Yeah.
And then they asked me to bring my own keyboard so I could rehearse with this with the singer backstage at times. And it's like, how much are you paying me for this?
Yeah. So you roll in with your Rhodes.
Yeah.
Who's going to schlep this on stage for me? And they change their mind and move the piano
don't yell at me when the
themselves.
feet of the Rhodes gouge the stage floor.
I love symphony because I've been on a few where the musicians complain about the stage volume before we've actually thrown a downbeat. And it's like, the steward comes over, and I'm a big union musician, so I'm not ragging on them at all. And they're like, steward is over there, and the conductor and a player's rep, and we just really need to address levels. And I'm like, I totally get that. Like, just can we maybe play a song and see where things are before you turn us off? Because
they see a drum set and everybody's like, whoa.
Well, the poor drummer's back there behind plexi, with toothpicks, and you can't get any feel that way. So you want this big rock and roll show, but you want to like squash us into little corners and put pillows on us. And I'm lucky because the piano's down front and I get to wear a funny colored tuxedo and have a good time.
Yeah, we're getting close to our hour here. Let's talk about your preferred attire for said gigs, your funny tuxedos.
That's not it.
That's one of the worst things for me. Like, they're like, you got to wear X. And like, do you realize this is not a good decision?
No, I wear blacks. That's my favorite thing. Stage blacks, black jacket, black shirt. I like Johnny Cash. I want to look like him, roll in like that. Usually like a black patent leather shoe with like a black pants, all that stuff. So.
Yeah. I struggle with black because your shirt and your coat and your pants and your socks, they're all a different shade of black. I mean, if you're in the darkness, it's okay.
I think it comes from just playing pits for so long that I'm no longer precious about it. Or the only time you can express yourself is what kind of sneakers you have on. Bright red shoes, but you've got black everything else to hide down there.
Yeah, some people call it, like for jazz, they call it jazz black. Like just complete darkness. Like, you're just moody and grumpy. But it's aesthetically, it looks horrible when you're on a well-lit stage. So, yeah.
Yeah.
How many color, like, do you have like a silver sparkle coats?
Some of them, for some of these flashier gigs, there's like a dark green or a blue or a silver coat. I do like a tuxedo. I like to dress up, but I don't know. I don't like playing in one if I'm really digging in because I feel like I'm going to split the seams or something like that.
Do you bedazzle your own tuxes?
I do not. I do not.
You have a person that bedazzles for you.
The bedazzling is usually done. I played a casino gig in Atlantic City.
Yeah.
One summer. Yeah. The sequin keys started here, went up the arm, across the back of the jacket, and then down the leg, and then continued on the fedora. So, and people would be really, really wasted, and it was a parade. The piano was on the back of a freaking parade float. So you're rolling through the casino playing, bad New Orleans jazz with like a 3-piece band who's miming along to, like a 15-piece arrangement that they had tracked. And I've got drunk people trying to like play my back, come up behind me. So yeah, it was bad news.
You do have a picture of this somewhere, right?
Somewhere there is.
Do I contact your wife? She hasn't met me yet. It'd be a really weird request. But I'm not afraid to do it.
You know where I live.
I do. I'll just wait till you're not home and be like, look, what is it going to take you to get a picture of this piano jacket?
Yeah, that was my least favorite stage attire by far.
It sounds pretty great though.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, on that note, it was super cool to chat with you about some of this stuff, and hopefully it'll generate some thought with students, because I don't think that they all know, or I mean, people, just not even students, don't even know what it's like to work in these worlds. And even as a musician, we don't understand what it's like for other musicians to function in different areas of the industry.
Definitely. Yeah, no, we live in a walled garden, so I'm excited to be here. We have an actor musician specialty that they're working on developing, and we've got some great shows that we want to produce here. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a lot of opportunity for all of our schools to work together and come up with these sounds. You know, we're not here to play boom chick, you know, cut time old school musicals. We're trying to do like the program of 2030. So it's Broadway sounds like what we listen to nowadays, and I'm excited to be here and be a part of that. So
Yeah, and I'm really excited to have another like keyboardist, pianist here, and to learn from you, because like the thing is sometimes we get locked in and we don't know what questions to ask, and we don't have people we could ask. And so when we can all like get together again, I'm gonna burn your ears off, because I've got so many questions.
And I'm going to be in your basement there playing all that, those synthy things you've got. You see my one controller, and my accordion is hiding over there, but can you tell that I lived in 500 square feet for the last 15 years?
Oh yeah, well you got an accordion, I've got two, so we could. I've got an Irish button accordion that I was supposed to learn to play, and
Nice.
that was a failure. And but no, this is a lot of this stuff is for the new degree. It's in my basement. The the Moog synthesizers and the Ableton controller here and the loop station. It's just, these are things that are going to be for students to work with. And right now, I'm learning them. You
Yeah.
know, and it's, as a keyboardist, it's just like I could push a button in main stage and get a synth sound, right? But there's something really interesting about an analog synthesizer and working with those tools, so that way when I can work within the software, I can make it do what I want it to.
It's so great. And we're like out of time and all that, but have you been down to Asheville and toured any of the Moog plant or the Moog Museum that's
You
down
know,
there?
I
So
haven't, and
fun.
and admittedly, I've never been like a huge gear guy, because it gets expensive really fast.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what do I need to function to make my wife not want to destroy me? You know,
Yeah.
so I've got a
So you
B3.
got two accordions?
I do. Well, one was my grandpa's that he gave me, who was willed to me, and the other
Oh,
one. But
nice.
yeah,
Every time I get mine out, my wife threatens to leave me. So
well, it's fun. Like I have a Kumar Mojo, which I bought a number of years ago, which is like a B3 um, clone, and I love it. I use it all the time because it's hard to find a bass player, and
yeah,
so buying that instrument to play jazz was awesome for me. Like I can justify it, but like
yeah.
buying the Moog 25 and the subsequent 37, like, and then I have the Minotaur, which is a bass synth mode. I just, it's not, people aren't hiring me to make that music right now, so it's hard for me to justify purchasing it. I
Yep.
mean, I've got this grand piano back behind me, that it took 10 years to pay off at monthly installments. So it's like, we're all just kind of like trying to figure out how to make it happen, and
Yeah.
but not wanting to stop growing as a musician. And that's
Absolutely.
why one thing I'm excited about having new other faculty here and having these conversations is we are still going to grow, learning from each other, and open kind of like our perception of what it is that students need to be successful musicians in 2020. Because what we did in 1980 versus 2020 sometimes isn't that different, but it's changed immensely, and we're headed that way.
Yeah. I'm excited. It's so fun. I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited. It's so great. I'm excited to meet everybody. To not just
Eventually,
know everybody as a face on a screen.
when you're getting to know Jackie O's beers,
I
right?
am. I
So
am.
that's
And the Little Fish Brewery. Yeah.
yeah. Is that what you have tonight, Little Fish?
I have a little Jackie O's tonight.
All right.
I do.
Well, it's it was really cool having this conversation tonight. I will we'll get it up for our students, but anyway, Brent Frederick, hopefully a new friend, if maybe arch nemesis. I don't know. We
No. Who needs that?
yeah, we've got enough of that.
Who
But
needs that?
yeah,
That's why
anyway.
I came here. Get away from that.
Well, it was great chatting with you tonight, and hope your
Man.
family's doing good, and can't wait for this all to be like, ooh.
Me too. Me too. All right. Well, I'll see you on Microsoft Teams.
like every day. All right, my friend. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks.